right around the corner, but in the meantime, there are tariffs, trips to Europe, and carbon tax pauses. Here to talk about it all is federal political commentator and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly. Brian, welcome back.
Good to be with you.
Wonderful to have you as well. Okay, so as we all know by now, Canada has a new Prime Minister, Sir Mark Carney. He was sworn in last Friday and immediately signed an order in council to stop the consumer carbon tax. But he didn't actually stop it, did he? I think he only paused it. Brian, you were critical about the way he tried to make people think he signed away the carbon tax. And in fact, you said that Carney straight up lied. Blarney on the
Mark
front,
Blarney,
on the front page of the Toronto Sun.
That was our front page. So
Okay.
There's a couple of things. One, the carbon tax is still there. You're right. What they did was they reduced the rate to zero on the consumer portion. The industrial carbon tax is still there. But the law gives cabinet, or governor and council as it's officially called, the authority to lower the rate or raise the rate or decide that it doesn't apply to certain things, does apply to others. So they lowered the consumer carbon tax to zero. But the way that he did it, it was the first cabinet meeting and they invited the TV cameras in. I don't recall, and remember, I did spend more than a decade up on the Hill, about 15 years on the Hill. And I never remember reporters being invited into cabinet. We'd get invited into the caucus room sometimes, hear the opening statement, and then be asked to leave. Carney invites the cameras in, the journalists in, no questions. But then he does this thing, just like Donald Trump speaks from the desk for a couple of minutes and then pulls out this thing and says, and I've signed it, and closes it. Well, Canadian Press photographer got a photo of what he signed, and it wasn't an order in council, which he could have done. He signed this made-up little document that said, I hereby instruct that the consumer fuel charge be eliminated by April 1st. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was, I hereby instruct, and then his signature. No prime minister has the authority to do that. He could have just had the order in council, which 4 ministers under the federal system, I believe it's 4, are required to sign. He could have signed that in front of everybody. Instead, he came up with this charade, signing a document that has about as much legal authority as a certificate of achievement, employee of the month type thing you pick up to give to you at Staples. I have no idea why he went to that length. And then, of course, as you say, carbon tax is still there. The full legal authority is a certificate of achievement, employee of the month type thing you pick up to give to you at Staples. I have no idea why he went to that length. And then, of course, as you say, carbon tax is still there. The full carbon tax is still there. They've just lowered part of it to zero. The rest of it's still going on.
Yeah, because, he needs backing to do that, doesn't he? Of the Parliament, yeah.
For it to fully be eliminated, that requires a vote in Parliament.
Yes.
They've got the regulatory authority to do what they did, but they need the full backing of Parliament to eliminate it.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we have Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, on the other hand, saying that he would kill off the whole carbon tax if elected Prime Minister. And many Canadians watching the news might be surprised to find out that, like you were saying, that the carbon tax is still in place and it's actually going up on April the 1st. So maybe explain the difference between the two.
Yeah, so they've left it on for industrial emitters. It's the output-based pricing system, and it rises every April 1st, just like the consumer carbon tax would. How that all plays out, steel mills. Mark Carney keeps using the example of steel mills. We're seeing layoffs at Algoma and a couple of other steel plants here in Ontario. I'm sure you're going to see that, and that's due to the tariffs. That's going to roll out in different industries affected by the steel and aluminum tariffs, and then April 2nd, the other tariffs. But April 1st, the industrial carbon tax goes up. So I've been trying to find out exactly where does that apply, because on your home heating oil or home heating, if you use natural gas, you're not going to pay it. But what about the farmer trying to dry his grain? Are they still paying the industrial tax, because that's an industrial use? So much isn't known here, but the fact is major industries are going to be paying, and they're going to be paying more, and Mark Carney wants to increase it. Now, after Pierre Poilievre said, I'll scrap the whole thing and we'll use technology to lower greenhouse gas emissions, a carrot, not a stick, Carney was asked about this in London and defended the greenhouse or the industrial carbon tax, and said, in fact, we need it if we want to be able to sell our oil and gas or other products into Europe. That's not true. I looked up the top countries for imports or exports to the EU for things like liquefied natural gas or oil. And Norway and the United Kingdom have a carbon tax, but the United States doesn't. Russia definitely doesn't. Azerbaijan doesn't. Kazakhstan doesn't. Algeria doesn't. So, Carney, again, going around saying things that just aren't true. I mean, he really is earning his nickname, Mark Blarney.
And you did mention there that in Europe, Carney was in Europe. So we're talking almost immediately after being sworn in, he jets off to Europe. And Brian, before we talk about the purpose of that meeting, I understand that his news conference with reporters didn't go well. So what happened that saw Mark Carney get testy with reporters?
So he has a habit of not liking any question that isn't deferential. Bank governors, it's not the same as an adversarial relationship between political journalists and an elected official. They often, the finance journalists are, just tell me what you're doing. Tell me what this is. They write it down. They go off and they do their story. It's very different. They're not challenging them all the time. Politicians get challenged by political journalists. One thing Mark Carney has been dogged about is his assets, his investments, his property ownership, all of that. It's pretty substantial. We found out that he had $6.8 million worth of share options from Brookfield Asset Management when he left at the end of January. We found that out not from him, but because the company's required under regulatory filings to reveal things like this for top executives. Carney won't tell anybody anything. And all he will say now is, it's in a blind trust. You have to trust me. Well, Stephanie Levitz from the Globe and Mail, one of the fairest, straightforward reporters you will ever meet up on Parliament Hill, respected by all, asks Carney a question about his assets and said, Canadians should know something. You can't just say it's in a blind trust. And he started lecturing her. And she tried to follow up, and he kept lecturing. And then it was Rosemary Barton from CBC. I mean, if you're going to find a friendlier reporter to the Trudeau-Carney Liberals, it's going to be tough. And she said, you were in the private sector for a long time. It's hard not to believe that there wouldn't be some kind of conflict of interest. And he said to her, look inside yourself, Rosemary. And then started accusing her of having ill will and started to lecture her. This was shocking to watch. 3 questions in a row with 2 female senior journalists on the Hill who followed him to Europe being lectured for daring to ask questions. Now, what's the issue here? The issue is Carney has a massive investment portfolio. He managed funds for Brookfield Asset Management, a company that does a lot of business with the government. Should he have to recuse himself from certain decisions that the government makes if it's going to benefit Brookfield? Absolutely. But the public should know that as well. And all he is saying is, you have no right to know. I've put it in a blind trust. No one needs to know anything. Some of his pay, the way it would be doled out, he's going to keep getting payments from these funds that he helped set up, investment funds, for years to come. And he can't sell that off. He can't divest of that. So we should get to know who's paying him and why while he's prime minister. And his view is, you don't get to know, and how dare you ask me questions?
Wow. What a contentious situation there. Now, the official news release said that the trip was all about strengthening Canada's trade relationships with European allies and defending Canada's sovereignty. So did Carney accomplish that goal?
He got a lot of good photo ops that he's going to use in the coming election campaign, and that's about it. The Canadian side asked for a joint news conference with both French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They didn't get either one. They got a few opening words from Macron and Carney standing at podiums together, but neither side took questions. There were, a couple of moments of Carney and Starmer sitting down together that was caught on camera, but no joint news conference. And of course, you just got him walking in and saying hello to King Charles. Those are all great photo ops. It was the most expensive pre-election photo op we've ever paid for the Liberal Party. Taxpayers paid for that, and it's just going to be used to make Mark Carney look prime ministerial, to run in ads, to put in brochures. and he got nothing. Neither Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, or Macron would stand up because they knew that they would be asked about Canada's sovereignty, the fight with the United States and Donald Trump, and they wanted none of that.
Wow. Well, you mentioned there photo ops for the election. And speaking of the election, Brian, you think an election could be called as early as this weekend? And we've had a couple of polls recently showing the Liberals are now in the lead, but others say the Conservatives are ahead. So you read polls carefully. So what should we make of all of this?
I go deep into the numbers. I don't just read the headlines on polls. It was taught by pollsters how to do this. And all I can tell you right now is the electorate is confused and up for grabs. They don't know what to do. You've got Leger with, I think, a 4-point lead for the Liberals, 42%. That's close to majority territory for them, except the Conservatives are right behind. The NDP is cratering. That much every poll is showing. NDP down at single digits or near single digits. And that's where the support for the Liberals is coming from. A little bit of people moving over from the Conservatives, but most of it's coming from the NDP. And then you've also got the Liberals are pulling older voters, 55 plus, boomers, especially in Atlantic Canada, in Quebec, in Ontario, and a bit in BC. Things haven't changed much across the prairies. The Liberals are up a little bit, but the Conservatives are still dominant across the prairies. Younger voters, though, sticking with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives at the moment. And when you look at the issue sets that drive those voters, the older voters are consumed with Donald Trump and the fight with the United States. Younger voters, still concerned about inflation, the cost of living, being able to buy a home. Two different voting sets. I've never seen it quite like this, so I can't tell you what will happen. But sometimes you look at the polling numbers and, the Conservative support can be overstated because they'll have between 55 and 60% in Alberta and not as much elsewhere. Well, if the Liberals are running up the numbers more than they can win seats in Atlantic Canada, where they're over 50% according to a couple of polls, well then, that's only going to help them so much as things go on. And this is a very bizarre looking map right now. When you read polls, you need to look at those demographic breakdowns I just mentioned, but then you look at the map and where are they getting the support? And it's very tough to say at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. And I think a new prime minister and the election has sort of taken attention and focus off of tariffs for a few days there, but they're still looming. And a concrete example of how those Trump tariffs will hit Canadian industry, a report is saying that the tariff on aluminum will mean $330 million in increased cost for the beer industry due to the cost of those aluminum cans. So could that also impact other drinks like soda or Red Bull or, anything
Absolutely.
else? Yeah?
In fact, I've been hearing about this from the beer guys for a little while. They've been terrified about this. And then I was at an event recently and met an executive from Red Bull who said this is their number one concern because the Red Bull you buy in Canada, it's processed in